live from a sub-basement beneath City Hall. The Queen City Improvement Bureau toils away, making reports, photocopying those reports, sending reports upstairs that get ignored. Someday they will escape that sub-basement that they've been stuck in for 9 years. But today is not that day. Instead, we're going to be working at improving things. This meeting is now in session. All right. So you can probably tell by that very terrible version of the intro script that Hayden isn't here. And it's just me. So I'm going to do attendance. Paul Deshane. See? Got it in one. It's not that hard. And I'm present. And I'm the only person here. So we're about as far away from quorum as the QCIB can get. Fortunately, we're loaded for bear for guests today. We have returning guests in the Queen City Improvement Bureau. We have Jon Kelly from the Queen City Urbanist Bookclub. Thanks for coming, guys. Because otherwise I'd be so lonely.
We wanted to make sure you were okay after today.
Oh my gosh.
After this week, it's been crazy.
It has absolutely been crazy. It is budget week in Regina. It's everybody's favorite time of the year, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little later than typical, but...
Yeah, you get to do the accountant dance.
What does that look like?
I would do it for you, but I sprained my gloit doing it earlier. So
ooh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, and we also have in the studio we have a David Loblaw.
Hello. You can't hear me, can you?
You can kind of hear you.
I'm not sure why. I'm in the corner on a stool.
Well, you could pull that. There's a microphone that you could pull around, David.
Yeah. I want to look at the board here.
Okay, yeah. So David, actually, no, grab the mic.
Oh.
Get on the mic there, David. So you're here shadowing. You're here watching me do my board jockey job because you've got something coming up.
Yeah, I just got, they just approved me to have my show. So it'll be called Rewind Regina, and hopefully starting in a couple of weeks, maybe on Sunday morning. We haven't finalized the time, but we're talking about all the weird and wacky people in this town. So
from like the past, though.
All in the past. I don't care about the future or the current day in any possible way. This is all in the past. I live in the past because I'm old.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Yeah. So no talking about anything. That we'll be talking about Henry Baker a lot, I guess.
Oh gosh,
the man.
I've only heard rumors.
That's right. You've never seen him.
Never seen him. I've never seen any of these old mayors.
No one, eh?
Yeah.
No, I'm hoping to add a reunion of the 4 current living mayors.
Oh,
in this very room. Wouldn't that be great? Having fist fight? Oh, it'd be great. Wrestling, fighting. Oh, that
would be Fougere, Fiacco, Masters, and Doug Archer?
Oh, that were bad. And Larry Schneider.
And Larry Schneider.
That were bad. I forgot about Masters. Oh.
Yeah, what about our current mayor, too? We got Mayor Baczynski.
Yeah.
Is he still mayor?
Oh, it's hard to tell, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah, no, let them talk about that. No, so hopefully we'll get them all in there. So there will be some civic politics, I guess, but past civic politics.
Brilliant. All right. Well, that is awesome. We'll be looking out for that. But yeah, I wanted to talk to Jon Kelly from the Queen City Urbanist Book Club because, as we mentioned, Aiden is not here. The budget was too much for him. It was. I asked him to carry my copy for me, and Aiden's just a little man, and it kind of crushed him.
Yikes!
It was a big budget.
That was the longest budget discussion they've ever had. Is that right?
It was. Yeah. So the last time they had to go multiple days was 3 days.
Oh,
that was the longest.
And when was that?
That was last year.
Okay. I was like, I remember the last one being really long, too.
Yeah. It was, Yeah, and it was supposed to be year 2 of a 2-year budget, so it was just supposed to be an update, and yet it just took forever to get through it. And part of the things they were ticked about, council, was that they didn't get a full budget document.
Yeah.
They just got an update, which is what they asked for.
So is next year the second year budget they get the mini one, or did they kill that?
No, that's a really good question. Actually, so what they've done is they've decided that this year would be a 1-year budget.
Okay.
And next year would be the start of a 2-year budget cycle.
Oh, okay.
And they decided to do this because, A, we have like a council of 11 people, with 9 of whom are new. Mm-hmm. So they thought it would be a little bit too much for the newbies to handle that. And also, this way now, instead of having a new council come in and you start a whole 2-year budget cycle, it'll be come in, get like the tail end, like the second half of a 2-year budget, and then do your first 2-year budget, and it'll overlap sort of the center of your budget time.
So you get to start with the hard budget, and then you get the easy budget.
Exactly.
Technically.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so anyways, today the budget, the current budget, the 1-year budget for 2025 passed, because it should have been done in December. Mm-hmm. But because we had a new council, they gave them, I guess 3 months of orientation, and these guys needed it.
Yeah.
But, so what was passed today, so we were told it was going to be 8.5% mill rate increase, but what we got instead was a 7.33% mill rate increase. And when you break that down, it was 1.47% for civic operations, which had originally been 1.9 before the debate started. And then 2.1 or 2.01 for dedicated mill rate increases. So that includes the indoor aquatic center, I still call it the Eastern Pressure Solution, but it's the water pressure system upgrade. Mm-hmm. And another thing that I can't remember. There's a third big dedicated mill rate increase. Oh,
the pool?
Is it the library?
The library.
Well, no, that's different. That is a separate dedicated mill rate increase, as far as I know. I don't think it's in there. I could be wrong. It's not in my table. Then the Economic Development Regina, they got a 0.13% mill rate increase. Regina Police got a 1.99, down from like 2 point something. And Regina Exhibition Association Limited took a 1.73% mill rate increase, down from 2.2 or 2.1, and then they dropped it down to like 1.8, and then council dropped it down by another $300,000 to get you to 1.73. So that's it. That's your total 7.33% mill rate increase. But that elides all the drama of the last 4 freaking days of council. So you guys didn't watch it, I take it.
I can't handle that stuff. I honestly don't know how you do it. Like, if I listen to any council meeting during the day, I get so upset. I start pacing around my room, yelling at Jon. No.
I do the same thing.
Emotionally dysregulated.
Yeah. I've got a full-time job I need to do. I need to be focused. It's too distracting to have to, watch. Because they were long meetings too. Like they were still like 8-hour meetings per day. So 3 days of that is just You guys don't want to have it on in the background instead of prog rock or whatever it is you do. Every once in a while you tune in, you see kind of how things are going, and then you see how things are going, and you're like, maybe I should. Read and come back to this later.
Sometimes I'll tune in and then I'll mute when the people are speaking. The guests.
Yeah,
the delegates.
The delegates. Sometimes I can't handle that.
Yeah. I find that people who don't know anything about what's going on find it incredibly boring. They just hear like a fly buzz or just like a drone noise.
No, this is WWE.
Right?
This is drama.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find it like thoroughly engaging. I will be sitting there and 3 hours will go by and I won't even notice. And I will same thing. I will get so upset, and it's like watching, I don't know, I think like a cricket test match if you're really into cricket. And it goes on for 3 days and you're really invested in how I don't know, London. It's going to. I don't know who plays friggin' cricket.
Yeah, it's kind of how council is. It's kind of like a really long reality TV show.
Yeah,
and some of the episodes are really intense, like this week. So
yeah, and you're being forced to watch it, like you're in a Japanese game show.
Kind of.
Yeah. Anyways, let's talk about some of the stuff that happened. And 90% of what I thought we should talk about today is stuff that didn't pass.
There was a lot that didn't pass.
Yeah.
That was madness.
We had a new council. Everybody wanted to put their stamp on the budget, which I think is funny because, like, in years past, you'd always have, like, there'd be, like, 3 new councillors, say, or 2 new councillors, and one of them would show up, and they would clearly be like, I have no idea what I'm doing here. I don't know how I got elected. And they would say they would do nothing in the first budget, and that was sort of like set the tone for their entire career. Mm-hmm. And they'd do 4 years of saying practically nothing. And then you have somebody who'd like do stuff. But yeah, you would have like councillors who would say nothing or do like make no motions in a budget process, and they would knock these things out. But that didn't happen this time. Everybody was coming with motions, and these people had never done this before.
I can't imagine a calm like council where no one talks.
Yeah.
What a nice thing to have.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
I've never been in that reality.
Yeah, we only really started following council within the last, 4 years. So the previous context for council is coming out of, Sandra Masters' kind of term. Yeah. So this is really the second, term of council that we've really been following. And it seems not really all that different, despite all this claim of, united civility. It did not kind of seem that way this past week.
Yeah. Well, this was the meeting where it really started to break down. The civility, the facade of civility started to crack. And I wanted to play. I thought we could start with the most epochal and disturbing motion that happened. And so this happened in 3 stages over 2 days, and it caused it was massive drama. So when it finally got voted on and passed, it was a motion from Councillor Mancinelli to cut staffing, out-of-scope staffing, by 1.51, 1.52%, $2 million, $1.51 million, which equaled out to half a mill rate increase. So they're going to cut the mill rate increase on the backs of people's jobs. But Mancinelli's motion came at the end of day 3, in the last 40 minutes of the meeting. Mancinelli moved this, and it was a surprise because this motion had come earlier in the day at hour 3, and it was moved by Councillor Bizot. And Councillor Bizot had the same motion, but he was moving earlier in the day. He wanted to get $3 million out of people's jobs to equal a 1% mill rate increase. So I didn't pull a lot of stuff from the Mancinelli motion because I wanted to go back to the motion, which is Councillor Bizot. And this is him introducing his motion, his request to pull down a % of mill rate increase on the backs of people's jobs.
Therefore, my motion is that city manager be directed to reduce the city operations staffing levels, specifically out-of-scope employees of manager level and higher classifications, including consultants, and to realize a savings of the equivalent of 1% mill rate, or about $3 million by the end of 2025.
Okay, Councillor Bizot, I just want to make sure if you look at the wording up top to make sure that we have it correct up there, if there's any words missing, because you mentioned, I think, out of scope in there. So I just want to make sure if there's anything missing that we captured.
Out of scope management levels, out of scope. Management level positions or higher, managers and above manager positions. And where this is driving from, as I go through the organization structure, I've looked at some of the information from a few years ago.
So I'll just get a seconder, and then I'll go back to you. So I'll look for Councillor Sickley's. And then go back to you, and then you'll have 3 minutes to get any clarification around it. Go ahead.
I looked at some of the staffing levels from 2023 Certain positions had about 5 staffs under those positions. Today, those same positions, as I count, had 57 people under that organization umbrella. As I go through the staffing for the entire city, it seems like there is different positions. I've seen directors with managers, 1 report, managers with no reports. Then I've gone all the way down to the organization structure of the people that do the work, the people that fix the roads, the people that repair the pipes, the people that are out there on the graders, the people that are expected to do the work that the city is requiring them. Foremen supervise 12 people, but yet managers supervise none. So if you want to describe this shape of how our city is operating, I'm going to say it's an hourglass. We're pretty fat in the middle. So at that point, I think my point is very clear what I'd like to see. We've asked all of our service partners to come back with a reduction. Everyone has come back with a reduction. Everyone has graciously come back to a reduction to help with that affordability, which is listed as top priorities. Now I'm going to ask the city to do the same.
So that was Councillor Clark Bezo introducing his motion to cut $3 million worth of city jobs. And we're on 91.3 FM CJTR, Regina Community Radio. Oh, Access Now Community Radio in Regina. And I am here with Kelly and Jon from the Queen City Urbanist Bookclub. And we're talking about the budget. So, hourglasses. Do we think that Clark Bezo has ever seen one?
Based on that description, probably not. I think hourglasses are very famously not big in the middle.
Yeah.
Maybe he plays The Sims. He's thinking of like those plumb bobs, the diamond ones.
Oh.
You think he's a big Sims player?
Yeah. Aiden left me an angry scrawled message saying that an hourglass that is fat in the middle is a second glass.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, so what are you guys' thoughts on the way he introduced this motion?
I actually did a little bit of thinking about this one because I was recently listening to a podcast by Charles Marone, the guy who wrote Strong Towns, called It Won't Be Us. And so he's basically talking about like the U.S. in this situation, like, you know, DOGE coming in and trying to find efficiencies in the U.S. government and like what is happening to all these cities and, you know, countries. Why are we all doing this at the same time? And it's like really from this place of fear, people are just really afraid. They can see that, like, you know, the city is really struggling. Like this budget, the whole discussion was about how, like, we don't have the money to do pretty much anything except maintain the status quo, more or less, and barely that. So, like, I can see that he's really trying to save his, you know, taxpayers some money, but that was just such a bad idea. I don't know any CEO who would make decisions on the fly like that. That's just not the way you go about cleaning house.
Yeah, especially as just a seemingly kind of random motion during budget discussions. Like, there's a time and a place for personnel cuts, as unpopular as they may be. Typically, they come as part of a strategic plan. You know, there might be some sort of strategic restructuring, and those could, result in job losses, right? But to just say, like, hey, we're cutting personnel to make up $3 million, you figure out who gets cut without any sort of criteria of which to on how to make those job cuts is just, I mean, incredibly cruel to administration to just be like, hey, you need to clean house and figure out how you're going to do that ASAP.
Yeah.
Plus, they just got squeezed by the last council. I mean, like, they had to find efficiencies then, and, like, the report came out after that, like, that really didn't work at all.
Yeah.
So I don't, like, didn't someone say that they were really big on evidence-based motions? Like, I'm like, where's the evidence here? We didn't see it the first time.
Yeah, that was, Rasevich said something about that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, first of all, the comparison to DOGE, I think, is incredibly apt. Like, this sounded like Bezo talking sounded very much to me like he was like either directly inspired by DOGE or the two ideas had like a common ancestor. And somebody reached out to me to say that he sounds like he's been watching too much Jordan Peterson.
I hope not.
But he does, yeah. And yeah, the last council did an efficiency review. They hired a consultant, Deloitte, who came in and, tried to find all of these efficiencies and gave them like a list of, recommendations. Didn't include cutting out of scope staff. And I think you're like, I agree with you that I think that if you're going to do cuts like this, it has to be in a more structured way. Yeah. And I think that's what drives me the most crazy is whenever council and a lot, like it's like 3 out of every 4 budgets, there's like some kind of horse trading or, budget making on the floor of council, and it never goes well.
No, this is how we got the 40 kilometer per hour safety zone in Cathedral, which has no evidence that it's effective, just because they didn't really like 30 as a number.
Yeah.
Which really made me angry.
Yeah, same. Well, I want to play a little bit more because if you found Clark Pizzo a little bit frustrating in that moment, here's him closing. So this is like after everybody else has spoken and the administration has weighed in on everybody else's questions. And it was pretty clear to me at this point that this didn't have a hope, but that didn't deter Mr. Bizzo.
The last council, we're sitting here to get a job done. We're not sitting here as politicians. We need to get a job done. Part of our elected mandate is to work towards what is on page number 10. If we sit here and talk about things, and Councillor Froy, I completely appreciate through policies, through other aspects to get the work done. But if we have vacant positions, the question really comes down to through vacancies, through attrition rate, why can't we get this? The first thing we want to throw out there is let's cut the firemen, let's cut the policemen, let's cut everything else. Real came to us. They said, hey, we're going to come back. We're going to save some money. RPS came back to us. We're going to save some money. The city has come back to us and said, we're going to raise the taxes. We need more money. So, that's where I'm coming from. The biggest ask has been borne upon the police, has been borne upon Real. We've had a few different things. We talked about strategies that were implemented. One, what strategies were implemented for this management of change? I've gone through the organization structure. We had 15 managers then. We did some big change management. Now we get 35 managers. So question is, what did we change? What did we optimize? We've got vacancies all over the place. We've got an attrition rate of 7%. And now we're saying we can't achieve something just by leaving positions vacant, and we can't achieve something by some attrition, that we're just going to sit here and not do something, and we're going to study it like a politician does?
I'll just check, are you asking any questions?
Well, that was a question. There's a lot of questions in there.
Okay, just making sure before I open it up.
Our CFO put up his hand. He said he's going to help me out by reducing budgets.
Mr. Anderson, go ahead.
Thank you, and through the chair. So appreciate your talk on vacancies. So there is a $9 million cost savings for vacancies in this budget. So it is built in. We do budget for vacancies. So yes, those jobs that you see are built into the budget. Otherwise, the mill rate would be higher. I will point out the fact that our total, operations ask is 1% increase. That's lower than inflation. Okay, city administration takes very seriously the cost to our residents. All right, our equivalent ask. I appreciate our chief of police. He's very eloquent. If we did the same thing as him, we would have asked you for a 13% mill rate increase and then came back here and told you we saved you 10%. But we didn't do that on the council floor. We did it. We did the hard work to make sure that our citizens weren't getting a raise, weren't getting too much of a cost. To come here and tell me that we have 75% of the budget with less of an ask than police,
Mr. Anderson,
and to insinuate that we are doing that job.
Mr. Anderson, I'll just ask, we won't get into a debate around it. I appreciate the facts on the budget, but we just don't want to get into a debate back and forth on it. Yeah. So, Councillor Beasley, you have about a minute.
No, I think I'm good. I think the point is well taken, and I'm going to say if we had some efficiencies already built into this budget, and the budget was laid out well before we sat around this table, we still got all these vacancies accounted for on the organization structure. Nothing's really changed. No one's coming to the table and said, hey, through attrition, we can actually achieve something, Councillor Manzanelli. Like, I'm still open to saying, can we do something less? Hey, I'm still open to it. Are we doing something? But at that point, I'm going to close for debate if everyone's done, and we'll move to a vote.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bezo. Okay.
All right. So that was Clark Bezo closing his motion out. And he asked a question of staff, and it was answered by Mr. Anderson. I don't know his first name. I'm tired. The new chief financial officer. And you also heard Mayor Baczynski sort of managing the meeting. I have never heard a CFO so livid in my life. And I've watched like 15 budgets now. And this was the most upset I've ever... That whole line about, to have you come in here and insinuate? That was... And, he immediately found a place in my heart. He was such a passionate accountant. He's multiple times through the meeting, he was giddy and gleeful explaining accounting stuff and explaining the numbers, and was so happy. And then to have Councillor Bezo come in on day 2 and just... come on day 3 and just wreck it for him. He's only had the job since January, and he had to face down this. I felt so bad for him, but at the same time, I was rooting for him.
That's a baptism by fire, for sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Like, it really strikes me that, Charles Moran says that, people will adopt, a slash and burn attitude towards things because they can't admit that, the system itself is broken, and that they, would have to make actual changes in the city. So it's if admin is the only way that we can save money, that's what he's got to do. But the reality is that there is no money to save really in the budget. I mean, you know better than anyone that we've pushed off infrastructure costs and all sorts of things for years and years and years. The library has come around 10 years or something. Yeah. So there was nothing to do. There's no fat to cut. It's so strange.
Yeah. I think another thing that it also signifies is just the culture of lack of trust in administration to put forward, a lean budget. That there's always an assumption that, administration is trying to, cheat the public out of their money, and the budget they present is filled with, fat to be cut. Right. So. Yeah.
And I think that really came out in this, where there was a lot of sort of naked disdain in the way that Councillor Bezo was addressing the CFO and administration there. That I think that if I had been a city staff, it occurred to me that technically Aidan and I should have recused ourselves from covering this at all, this item, because technically in the Bureau we're out of scope employees of the city. In fact, we're so out of scope that they don't really know we're here.
Well, perhaps to your guys' benefit, you just kind of hide.
Evidently. I'm worried, though, we would have been the first to get, chopped. Although they don't pay us, so it would have,
If you're not on the paperwork, how would they find you?
That is what we think.
It's the fact that you guys aren't on the org chart.
Exactly.
There you
go. So the stuff about the structural problems. I think one of the things that I find frustrating is that so many of the sort of the strong town structural changes that the city needs to make, they all exist in our master plans, right? They've been discussed for 15 years or more. We kind of know the changes that need to be made to sort of, engineer a city or, revision a city that is more efficient at sort of a core fundamental level. And those are the first things that get cut at budget time, right? Mm-hmm. We talk about, the need for a robust transit system. They had the knives out for the transit system at this meeting. And that we talk about, active transportation. They had the knives out for that. And we're acting as though the people asking $400,000 for a bike path were somehow asking for the moon, and that, why are we always giving money to bike paths? And it's you aren't. That's usually the first thing to get cut. And we haven't had big, massive bike path expansions in ages.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, well, if they really had their money where their mouth was, they would have been supporting, densification efforts and expanding, like, the densification zoning and, killing parking as a conversation at all and all these things. This is all evidence-based. It's very logical. There's tons of books. I can recommend very many of them. And they don't, because it's not about that. They just want to save money without having to actually do anything.
Yeah, not only that, it's just that people get so, how do I phrase this? So caught up in how, they personally live their lives and how they think that, the typical middle-class life should be lived, that they think that everything that doesn't fit inside of that is just waste.
Yep.
So people, they drive from their home to work, right? So because they don't typically bike, they think that adding bicycle infrastructure is just extra waste. Like, everyone should just drive like they do, right? Yep. And it's the same thing with transit, right? There's this stereotype that, transit is kind of like a service for the poor, right? Or for, I guess, the new Canadians that, don't have their driver's license, right? But really, they should just, get a car. So we don't need to spend as much money on that.
Absolutely. We should go to Innovative Revenue Tools right now, but we'll come back in a few more minutes and carry on with this conversation. And we're back from Innovative Revenue Tools. Yeah, so we're talking about the 2025 budget debacle. We were talking before we went to the Innovative Revenue Tools about the motion to lower the mill rate increase by cutting staff. Mm-hmm. And that did fail. But as we mentioned, it did come back in the last 40 minutes of the meeting from Councillor Mancinelli, and it passed this time. So only Mayor Masters...
You just want her back, don't
Mayor
you?
Baczynski, you know what? There were moments.
She's great at running meetings.
She could really run a meeting, especially a budget meeting. And there were moments where having a little bit more institutional knowledge in the room would have been darn helpful. So Mayor Baczynski, Councillor Zakidniak, Councillor Flores voted against this motion. Councillor Fro had to recuse himself because apparently he has a family member who is a consultant. And when it came back as a cut of half a mill rate and $1.5 million, it included not just out-of-scope employees, but consultants. Councillor Fro apparently has a family member who's a consultant and didn't feel it would be ethical for him to stay in the room, so he recused himself. This motion passed. And I don't know if you caught this, but there was like the moment where the CFO kind of got a little bit testy, and Mayor Baczynski cut him off and said no debating. There was a moment when Mancinelli had brought his motion back the second time where City Manager Nikki Anderson had started to talk, and she started to give some context on what this motion would mean to city staff, and was cut off again by the mayor for debating. So we didn't get to hear from the city manager. Overnight, it seems like, I don't know, somebody sent it off to the city senate, and sober second thought, because the next morning, I had heard rumblings early in the morning that this motion was not going to last, that this decision to cut staff, to cut the mill rate increase was not going to last. And that's exactly what happened. So Mancinelli got his motion passed to cut staff in the last 40 minutes of day 3, and then in the morning of day 4, the very first item was Mayor Baczynski brought forward a reconsideration motion and basically said there's more information that we needed and we should have considered it before we made our decision last night. So the reconsideration motion passed after it took a lot of work to get council to understand exactly what was going on and the steps that would be involved in a reconsideration motion. But they got through it and they reconsidered, and then they had to go back and they had to consider Mancinelli's motion from the night before over again and vote against it. And then Mayor Baczynski brought in his own motion. And this was to retain the 0.5% mill rate reduction, but just hand it back to administration. Drop it in the city manager's lap and say, you find the savings for us, and come back in April and tell us how you did. And if that sounds familiar, the council did this exact same thing 2 years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, and it was Councillor Brishani who came forward with a 1% mill rate reduction and said, I'm not going to tell you how to do it, you do this. Well, I'm going to let you figure it out. And so in her first year, and now in, I guess, her third or fourth year, the city manager has had the budget basically dropped in her lap and told to figure it out. And it's kind of hilarious. I'm going to play a few minutes here of Councillor Zakidniak, because she was around for the Brishani motion, and she'll provide us with a little bit of context on how that went.
Last term, and just for to go over that, last time it was 1% mill rate decrease, and administration discussed some of that. There were a lot of unintended consequences because we arbitrarily directed this on the floor of council, and there was also a report to executive committee. It's kind of like Groundhog Day, and also I think a lot of people realized that was a mistake last time. We were also asking staff to make adjustments to their budgets without looking at our own budget, right? They had to cut their travel and their communication and other things. Council did nothing. So it wasn't received well. It didn't go well. Most people realized that it was a mistake. I didn't support it then, and I don't support it now.
So that was Councillor Zakidniak, and explaining, the Groundhog Day that she was living through this morning, that this new council basically just made the exact same mistake that a previous council did. It's going to be a smaller mistake. It's only 0.5% instead of a full percent. But I expect council is going to regret this decision at the end of the year when they realize there's a deficit, and they're going to have to add this 0.5% back onto next year's budget.
Well, they didn't really plan for any wild fluctuations in economic status of Saskatchewan or Canada in general. Yeah. Same with the Saskatchewan budget. So I'm really wondering what's about to happen. I have a feeling they're going to end up in trouble kind of at the end of the year, looking at their budget, really realizing nothing is really what it was supposed to cost.
Yeah. Yeah, and in essence, I mean, it's like Zakidniak said, it's essentially a mill rate deferral. Yeah. Where it's just like, sure, there's going to be, we're going to need to make up this 0.5% or 0.5 mill rate increase, but we'll just put it off for later, in essence, right? They say they cut it, but it evidently, based on what happened last time, it's likely to pop up again just a year down the road. So it just kind of has, it emphasizes this culture within Regina municipal politics of just push the problem down the line, right? It's like, it's the same with, infrastructure maintenance deferral. It's the same with, deferring maintenance on basically everything in Regina. This is just a deferred tax increase that will eventually have to be made up anyway.
Well, all of these conversations are like deja vu, right? Like the library coming up again, the Brandt Center coming up again, they all need to be replaced. All these things, they never stop coming back, and it's because we never solve the underlying problem. We just keep band-aiding the levy, hoping that it still holds. And one of these days, it's just there's not going to be any more band-aids left. We've got to fix it.
Yeah, there's only so much you can cut, right? It's like selling your furniture to avoid or to be able to
afford your house,
right? And it's eventually there's nothing left. There's going to be nothing left to cut.
Yeah, you'll be pulling the copper out of the walls.
Regina's house poor. We don't have anything nice here anymore. It's just the copper in the walls that's left.
Yeah. Everything you said, I agree with. Right. And that is kind of how we got to this 8.5% proposed mill rate increase, is that the administration talked about how they were only asking for 1.9% at the beginning, and that this has come about because of this kicking the can down the road. And one of the things I've noticed online is that people keep talking about the 8.5. The city's asking for 8.5, and inflation isn't 8.5. It's like 2. And that people will like acknowledge that there's a breakdown to the budget, but they keep going back to the aggregate and forgetting that aggregate includes the police, includes real, who, requested large mill rate increases. And this kind of drives me nuts, because one of the things that's hidden in a lot of the past mill rate increases that the city's had is that city operations didn't get an increase at all. So we definitely had, like, under Fiacos, this is like 3 mayors ago, there were like 3 budgets where the mill rate increase was 0 across the board for everybody, including police. And then that quickly became, recognized as a total disaster for the city. And the second budget, when Fougère was mayor, they had to do a 7% proposed mill rate increase to catch up on some of that spending that didn't happen under Fiaco. But one thing that's been hidden in a lot of the Fougère budgets is that there was a 0% increase for city operations, and the mill rate increase, whatever it would be, 3, 4, 5%, would just be going to the police. It would just be going to real. It would just be going to like dedicated mill rate increases like the stadium, and operations got nothing, or something like really far below inflation. And of course, like inflation is municipal inflation, which is typically what cities have to face, much higher than what households face. So. Right.
What a nightmare. I can't imagine like their Christmas parties are any fun, because they must not be able to afford anything.
Well, I think everybody on council was like, we're going to have such I love all these people. We're going to have such a great Christmas party this year. Not like last year. This is going to be great. And I don't know, after this meeting, I think there might be 2.
Can they justify a nice Christmas party at this point?
I don't know. I don't know where they're going to find the funds.
Yeah, it can come from that 5% that, what is it, who is it, Bezos? Was it Bezos and Rasevich that were saying they were going to give 5% of their salary?
Good point, yeah. They can put it in a coffee tin, throw a party.
Yeah, that's not so bad.
That'll be great for morale.
$12,000 between the two of them.
Yeah, the Clark and Dan Christmas party.
Sponsored by Clark and Dan. They bought the naming rights.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, they should get a show. All right, so this meeting, this motion, it ultimately got flipped, and we got a new motion, and we now have a Brashani's Budget Breaker 2.0.
Yeah. Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah. But there were other motions that failed. Which do you guys want to do? The attack on transit and bike lanes, or the attack on electric buses?
We got to talk about electric buses, because that one made me want to jump out a window.
Yeah. Go.
I'm so speechless. Like, I cannot believe, like, admin was really there saying, like, we cannot do this. This is not feasible. There is no reality in which this would function. Like, we've bought these buses. They are paid for. This will not do anything. But, like, just keep on forging ahead, evidence-based cuts. Let's do it.
I'm sorry, I should have given some context, because there's people listening who may not have been watching the last 4 days. We have the electric buses coming that we've paid for. 50% of the price is paid for by the federal government, which basically makes these electric buses a little bit more expensive than a regular diesel bus. And so we've got 7 coming this year and 13 coming next year. And George Siklis, councillor from Ward
2, I think. 2? Harbor Landing.
Yeah, right. He tried to pass a motion to cancel the 13 buses coming in 2026. And administration had to inform them that's a completed contract. If we say no to this, there will be legal repercussions, fines, and we might lose the federal money. So not only would we have to buy the 20 buses at their full price, we won't have any federal money to offset it, and the federal government will probably never give us another grant. So we wouldn't just be losing the $20 million, the price of 20 buses, which would be a lot more than $20 million. And we will also never get another grant, so we're losing all that money as well.
Well, plus you lose the trust of the feds, who are like, what the heck are you doing?
Yeah. Who've been our best friends for the last, like, 10 years. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and plus, like, my theory is that, like, one of his constituents may have been talking to him, because when I was at the tax meeting that they had,
budget meeting with that councillors at Kidney.
Right, one of the individuals was talking about how dangerous electric buses are and how they, like, light on fire quite often. Right. And so I'm like, I wonder if this is, like, a little conspiracy theory tinge. That's my tinfoil hat theory.
Yeah. Well, maybe. There's a lot of conspiracy theories flying around council right now.
I mean, with some of, like, the D&I initiatives that they were throwing out there and, like, the DOGE cuts, I'm like, this is getting a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the points that was brought up, I believe it was in that budget meeting, was saying, like, how much more, I guess, cheaply these buses would run over the long term, right? Yep. That while the initial cost would be, slightly more expensive, between maintenance and, I guess the lack of fuel costs, that money would be made up over time. So if you're looking for efficiencies in, in spending, then the savings that come along with, an electric bus would be evidently very, very welcome. It's just when you get to that kind of ideological barrier where where it's not evidence-based thinking that it might kind of throw a little bit of a wrench in there.
Well, plus they said they were only replacing end-of-life buses, so it's not like we're replacing brand new.
Yeah.
So
I loved how administration pointed out under questioning from councillors at Kidney that a bus, an electric bus, over its 17-year lifespan, which is what they use as their baseline, will save I think it was $700,000. Over that 17 years, and councillors were like, $700,000 over 17 years, that's nothing. I was like, dude, you've got to, like, multiply it by the number of buses, and all of a sudden that becomes a very big number.
I mean, isn't it the strong town's way to, like, make the little changes, the little increments? It's like, okay, maybe it's a little money, but this is a little thing we can do and not get fines from the government.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of thinking about that Queen Street building too, where it was another opportunity for the city to start bringing in more money, right? Where, they always chase these operational efficiencies at budget time, right? But they often ignore stuff like, land use efficiencies, right? Where that's something that has recurring revenue for the city, right? Recurring tax revenue, but, they're very hesitant to implement those changes because, so there's a little bit of disruption there in how people live their lives. But ultimately, it's going to come eventually where there's not going to be a choice. Like, you're going to have to start accepting that, we need to bring in more revenue, not just cut expenses.
Yeah, absolutely. We're on 91.3 FM CJTR. Access Now Community Radio in Regina. We're the Queen City Improvement Bureau, and we're talking with Jon and Kelly from the Queen City Urbanist Bookclub. I've got one more clip that I want to play for you guys. And one of the things that I was noticing, this is actually more sort of, I guess, meta, like more over top. One of the things that I noticed was there was the tensions were starting to form. There was a lot of back and forth. It was a little less civil and productive, and I wanted to play an exchange here. Now, this is over bike lanes and buses, and this is Councillor Rasevich. Councillor Rasevich had just introduced a motion here to cut $450,000 that was going to go to bike lanes, and he was just saying, let's take a pause on bike lanes. Just, we take a pause this year. Things are tight. They'll still get built. We give tons to bikes. That's my Councillor Rasevich. And so that, you will hear how that vote goes, and then he introduces his next motion, which is to cut $3 million from the $7 million that was allocated to transit. And we'll see how that gets past councillors at Kidneyak.
Go to Councillor Rasevich to close on this one.
Yeah, I'll just say again, you all campaigned on affordability. You all campaigned on trying to keep the mill rate low. And all I'm asking is 1 year. You know what? Take a pause. Because this is low-hanging fruit that we can give to our taxpayers as we have more time, only 4 months in council, to look for other long-term solutions. But this is some immediate sort of relief to taxpayers so that we can, like I said, $5.7 million. I got an amendment. You know what? Because without this, you're going to be going to tax. You guys can explain why you're going to want 6% or more mill rate. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I will go to the clerk to start the vote.
So for the record, the amendment has been lost in a vote of 4 in favor, 7 against.
So I'll go to this one. That the requested amendment, the requested $7.7 million increase for transit be reduced by $3 million for approved, resulting in an approved increase of $4.7 million. So all I'll say about that is, so I guess of that $7.7 million, I think a majority of it, part of it's for reserve, part of it is to pay for more transit hours, etc. We've given more transit hours. We've given 25,000 more transit hours in the last 2 years. So that's not going away. All that'll do is probably take away money from the reserve, or I guess however administration wants to divide the money in terms of either making some cuts or no cuts or no money in reserve. And so I'll just leave it in your hands. If you've got some questions, I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Zakiniak. Go ahead.
I first want to clarify that I did not campaign on reducing taxes, and so I think it would be really helpful if people spoke about themselves and what they campaigned on instead of making statements about what all of council did. Secondly, we talk about finding budget savings. Councillor Radins just found $300,000 extra, like that passed. So people are seeming to forget about that efficiency that was just amended. Never mind the efficiencies that our partner organizations voluntarily made to reduce the mill rate. It is not 8.5% anymore.
All right, so that was Councillor Rasevich versus Councillor Zakidniak.
Wakes on the green.
Yeah. There was a lot of this. There was a lot of Councillor Rasevich the first day or two, kind of speaking for other councillors and saying, "You're here to cut. You're here to do so and so." And he was getting he was kind of flabbergasted that his motions weren't passing. And there was a moment where Councillor Siklis wanted to hire 2 FTEs worth of auditors for the city, right? And he found out that, you have to actually fund any spend that you put into the budget, or else it comes onto the mill rate. And he was like, and he was annoyed because the big things hadn't passed yet, because him and Bizo and Rasevich had come up with this list of motions that was going to cut millions from the budget, but they hadn't banked on none of them working.
Do you think they're all working together, as a triad?
They were working. You know what? If not, they can improvise really well, because they really seem to know what each other's moves were, dance moves.
They were all voting together.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think they're ideologically pretty similar. So it's kind of, even if they're not explicitly working together, I mean, they seem to be ideologically aligned. So it could just be that.
Yeah.
I think they're bullies. Just gonna say it. I mean, if they're looking for bullies, that's where they are. They have this weird, I think we said this in our last podcast, they have this weird coalition where they seem to talk over everybody, interrupt people. A lot of the women on council don't get to talk. Zakiniak was really trying to get her voice heard there. Yep. And so I totally respect her for that. But wow, what a weird vibe.
Yeah. I think, too, what we also saw was every time Councillor Bizot's mic was on, he kind of started to take over and act like mayor.
Yeah.
Like, he would end his things like, well, I'll close, and then we'll move it to a vote. And it's like, you don't get to move to votes, right? Like, that is the chair's job. The chair checks to see if anybody else wants to talk, then moves to a vote. You don't get to do that. And there was this great moment where this happened today, and they were talking about the library budget, which passed as requested, right? They got all their mill rate increases, they got all their funding. But Councillor Siklis had asked a legitimate question. So there's a dedicated mill rate increase that is going to be going to fund the Central Library. So it's, I think, 5.5%, maybe. A library mill rate is 1/10 of a municipal mill rate, so it's much smaller. This isn't like an extra 5% on your bills. So yeah, it was like a 5% dedicated mill rate for the Central Library. And George Siklis had a legitimate question: what does that play out to in dollars? And so whenever somebody asks how a mill rate applies to the budget, the CFO has all the numbers there, and CFOs always sit down and they work it out on the fly because they have these numbers in their heads and they know how to do all of this stuff. Well, the CFO is sitting there trying to figure out what a 5.5 mill rate increase would net the library. Clark Bizot is doing his own calculations, and he's shouting out. And I can't make out what numbers he's saying. I can just make out that he's shouting out numbers that he's coming up with on his scratch pad around the circle. And the mayor finally had to say, tone it down. And I'm just thinking, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm doing math, the last thing I need is somebody shouting random numbers near me.
I can't imagine being the CFO of an organization and someone in a meeting just shouting numbers at you like you can't do math yourself. How disrespectful. Exactly.
There was a moment where the CFO and Clark Bizot were having a back and forth, and Clark Bizot asserted that the city mill rate increase was going to be 12% for the next 3 years. And the CFO was just stunned. He didn't know what to say for a second. He was like, we haven't set the mill rate for 2026 or 2026 and 2027. And Clark Bizot says with absolute confidence, well, projected.
In what reality?
Yeah. Who projected this? Nobody projects a mill rate into the future.
Was it him that said, just give us one more year? And during that clip, they were like, hey, we need to have 1 year where we take the mill rate down. Just give us one more year to find, the efficiencies. And it just has to do with this culture of like I was saying earlier, this culture of deferral, where it's like, we can't deal with it right now. We'll deal with it later. Yeah. Right? And we always push decisions down the line and down the line and down the line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's rough to be the council that this gets landed on, right? When all of you ran on, oh, we're going to find efficiencies, and there are no efficiencies to find. Yeah. I'm sorry that, they have to justify that to their taxpayers to a certain degree. But, the reality is that there was no easy choice to make here.
Yeah.
And I just don't know what they thought was going to happen.
Yeah, especially from being outside of the city, right? So they're brand new councillors, and they're saying, we're going to find efficiencies. It's like, well, you haven't worked with city administration, so how do you know, what to look for and what you're going to find? So they make all these promises that are like, okay, we're going to keep your taxes low, and we're going to, find efficiencies in, how the city is being run, but, they don't have that internal knowledge to know how the city is currently being run, or whether or not they can actually, fulfill that promise that they've made to their constituents. And we've seen that, trying to, see that in this budget meeting where, it's kind of a hack and slash and try and get whatever you can so that you can keep your promises that you've made to your constituents.
Yeah. We're actually out of time. I'm sorry. This was great. You guys are fantastic, and thank you for this.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for having us.
No, anytime. You're always welcome. But we have 1 minute. What's the next book for the Queen City Urbanist Book Club, and where can they find you online?
Oh my gosh, we are reading Paved Paradise, How Parking Explains the World by Henry Grabar, especially for Councillor Burton, because he seems to be a little occupied with parking. We're going to read about it. You can find us on the City Leisure Guide, on the Cathedral Village website, or on Facebook. We're the Queen City Urbanist Book Club.
Right on. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, Kelly and John. And David, I'm declaring this motion, or this meeting. I'm making a motion to end this meeting. We've been the Queen City Improvement Bureau on 91.3 FM CJTR, Access Now Community Radio in Regina. I've been your host, Paul Deshane. We've been here with Jon and Kelly Lawrence from the Queen City Urbanist Bookclub, and shadowed by David Loblaw, who's got a show coming up on the mighty CJTR soon. Where to find us? QueenCityIB.com. You can also go to YouTube at PD City Hall. There's like all our old podcasts and stuff. Our website, QueenCityIB.com, has like all 9 years of our show. You can also find Aiden and I on Blue Sky mostly now. And I think that's about it. Coming up, it is the Record Room and then music all on through the night. Thanks for listening and keep on improving, Regina.
I'm the host of The Capital. Join me every Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. or Tuesdays at 1 for the best new music of the week, only on 91.3 FM CJTR Access Now Community Radio. Tuned into your community.